A man with a scarred back paces the stone floor of a rented room in Corinth. A scribe sits at a low wooden table in the corner, handing them a set of cultural boundary lines. Don't listen to that music. Don't engage in those politics. Don't look. Or dress. Or speak like the neighborhood. The pressure does not care if you face an emperor or an angry mob. The goal of the Aeon is always the same. It wants to squeeze you back into the shape of your old desires. It wants to make you predictable. It wants to make you manageable. The danger for these exiles is not a sudden, dramatic denial of their faith. It is a slow, quiet assimilation. It is the subtle shifting of their internal values until they match the neighbors who hate them. 2 apostles, 2 letters, 1 terrifying diagnosis. If the entire age is an iron mold pressing against the soft clay of our minds, how do we survive the crush? If the pressure never stops, what breaks the mold? Paul does not leave the Romans without an escape route. He does not tell them to fight the pressure with sheer willpower. In the very next breath of chapter 12, the pacing changes. The ink spells out a counterword. The antidote to conformity is not rebellion. If the age you live in is trying to press you into a schema, a temporary, outward costume, you cannot survive by simply swapping out the secular costume for a religious one. That is the great mistake of modern behavioral Christianity. We think that if we stop doing the things the world does, we have won. But if your internal motivations are still driven by fear around you, and it does carry that kind of weight sometimes, behavior does matter. But if you look closer at the exact Greek words Paul spoke into the pride and the desperate need for security, you are still wearing a mask. You have just painted a cross on it. You cannot beat an external pressure with an external performance. Paul knows this. He knows that fighting the crushing weight of the Roman mold with sheer human willpower will only exhaust the believers. So he gives them the only defense that actually works. He finishes the sentence, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed." The word tertius scratches onto the papyrus is the Greek verb metamorpho. We get the English word metamorphosis from it. But to understand the sheer power of what Paul is proposing, you have to look at the anatomy of the word. It is built from 2 Greek roots. Meta indicates a profound change or transition, and morphe means the essential, unalterable core of a thing. The morphe is the true identity. It is the exact polar opposite of the schema. The schema is the theatrical mask you tie around your head. The morphe is the bone structure of the face underneath. The schema is the suit of armor you put on to survive the battlefield. The morphe is the blood pumping through the veins inside it. When Paul tells them to be metamorpho, to be transformed, he is deliberately contrasting it with the word he just used for conformity. Dark of that Corinthian room. And at the suffocating reality of the empire he was writing to, you start to see something the behavioral reading completely misses. Transformation is not a modification of your outward behavior. It is a mutation of your inward essence. He is telling them that the only way to break the heavy iron mold of the current age is to undergo a structural change at the deepest possible level of human consciousness. The change must be so tectonic, so fundamentally altering, that the external mold simply shatters from the inside out, because the material it is trying to hold has become something else entirely. But metamorpho is a rare word in the New Testament. Paul uses it here, and he uses it once more in a letter to the Corinthians. But to truly grasp the terrifying glory of what this word implies, we have to look at the only other time the gospel writers use it, because Matthew and Mark do not use this word to describe a psychological process. They use it to describe a physical event, and it happens years earlier, far away from Rome. On the cold, rocky peak of a high mountain, 3 fishermen follow a carpenter up a high, unnamed mountain. The air grows thin. Their lungs burn. The loose stones shift and clatter beneath their leather sandals in the dark. They are exhausted. Conformity is not a list of rules you accidentally break. It is an invisible mold you are unknowingly pressed into. The question is not merely whether they reach the summit. The carpenter stops to pray. And then, The fabric of the physical world tears open. Matthew and Mark record what happens next. When they try to describe the terrifying, blinding event, they reach for the exact same Greek word. Paul will dictate to his scribe decades later. He was transfigured before them. Metamorpho. His face shines like the sun. His clothes become as brilliant as a lightning strike. The disciples fall flat on the dirt, pressing their faces into the cold ground, paralyzed by an ancient, holy terror, because the light does not fall on him from the stars. The light rips out of him from the core. For 3 years, these men have known Jesus in his schema. They have seen the outward, temporary fashion of a Galilean rabbi. They have seen him sweat under the midday sun. They have seen him sleep in the back of a wooden boat. They have watched him eat and walk and bleed. They thought the schema was the whole story, but on the mountain, the schema cannot contain the morphe. The outward shape shatters to reveal the inward essence, the unalterable. Eternal reality of the Son of God simply overwhelms the physical container. The transfiguration is not a costume he put on, are imitating the culture. The question is, what the culture is actively doing to your mind while you aren't paying attention. And the answer changes how you. It is the reality he finally let out. This is the word Paul chooses for the believers in Rome. He does not use a word for moral improvement. He uses the word for the mountain. He is telling them that the life of the Spirit inside of them is supposed to break through their human frames with the same tectonic, unstoppable force. Transformation is not the adoption of a new religious aesthetic. It is the detonation of a new internal life. If you have the morphe of Christ inside you, it must eventually overwhelm the schema of the empire around you. The inner reality must bleed through the physical veil. But Jesus is the author of life. The men and women hiding in the shadows of the Palatine Hill are just exhausted people. They cannot generate blinding light on their own. They cannot force their own transfiguration. So, how does the fire of the mountain actually happen in the dark valleys of Rome? Paul gives them the exact location of the trigger, and it is not in their behavior. Paul finishes the sentence. He points directly at the battlefield. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. He does not target their hands. He does not target their feet. He targets the center of operations, the mind. Read every single page of the New Testament. To feel the weight of this warning, you have to realize what Paul is up against. The mind is not a neutral processor of information. It is the steering wheel of the soul. It is the lens. It is the altar where your identity is actually forged. The Aeon knows this. The Empire knows this. Rome does not care what you do with your hands on Sunday if it owns your imagination on Monday. The current age does not care if you sing the right hymns or sit in the right pews. As long as you process your fears using its exact emotional machinery, the assault is relentless. It happens in the quiet moments. It happens when you stare at a glowing piece of glass in the dark. It happens when your jaw clenches at a political headline. It happens when the cold sweat of financial terror wakes you up at 3 in the morning. The news cycle pushes panic. The algorithm demands outrage. The market demands obsession. It feeds you fear. It sends a chemical rush of anger into your bloodstream. It makes you addicted to the heavy, constant hum of anxiety in your chest. It tells you to build taller walls. It tells you to stockpile your money. It tells you to hate the outsider. He is sending this parchment into Rome. Rome is not just a city. It is an architect of human conformity. It is a machine designed to assimilate. Same mold, same pressure. The renewing of the mind is not an educational exercise. It is an act of neurological warfare. It is uninstalling the operating system of the empire. It is tearing down the load-bearing walls of your old worldview. It is ripping up the floorboards of your deepest assumptions about power and safety and success. You cannot fight the iron mold of the culture with human willpower. You can only fight it with a better focal point. You have to replace the diet. You have to change the air. You stop evaluating human worth by visible productivity. You stop measuring your security by the size of a storehouse. You look at a Roman cross and you do not see a humiliating execution. You see the wisdom of God. You let the reality of the morphe, the unalterable essence of Christ, overwrite the temporary schema of the world. This is not behavior modification. This is survival. The mind is the only place the mold can be broken. If the age cannot capture your imagination, it cannot conform your life. And when that cognitive shift finally happens, the results stretch across the entire biblical timeline. Because the pattern of those who refuse the mold has always looked exactly the same. Every conquered nation, every strange religion, and every dissenting thought into the image of Caesar. Rome does not ask for your agreement. A scribe scratched a warning in the winter cold, and the iron mold of an empire was exposed. A fisherman wrote to scattered exiles, and the pressure to blend in lost its power. A carpenter climbed a dark mountain, and the inward essence shattered the outward shape. A tiny church lived in the shadows of Caesar, and they refused the costume of the age. The theatrical mask tried to crush the human mind, and the true identity pushed back from the inside out. The world demanded an automatic conformity, and the spirit offered a total metamorphosis. The altar of the temple demanded a bleeding sacrifice, and the altar of the mind became the living battlefield. Same pressure, same counterword, but maybe the part that stays with me most is the word schema. The theatrical mask, the costume. We spend so much of our lives terrified of the world's power, intimidated by the sheer size of the modern empire, assuming its hold on us is absolute. But Paul looked at Rome, with all its marble statues and iron swords, and he called it a schema, not a permanent reality, but a fragile, fleeting facade that cracks the moment the true light hits it. If you are in a season where the weight of the culture feels like an iron press on your chest, where the panic of the news cycle and the outrage of the algorithm are pulling your attention apart, Romans chapter 12 is a place to stand. It demands your shape, but the detail that changes everything is hiding in the grammar of the command itself. Because to understand what Paul is asking, you do not have to fight the pressure by building taller walls. You do not have to exhaust yourself performing a religious aesthetic, just to prove you are safe. The defense is not a thicker armor. It is a renewed mind. If this opened something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels exhausted by the anxiety of this current age. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who shines out of the darkness shatter the iron mold around you and bring you into the blinding, beautiful light of who you were actually made to be, them to resist. We have to look at the exact words Tertius is scratching onto the page, dipping a dried reed pen into a clay pot of black ink. It is the winter of 57 AD. The wind off the Aegean Sea rattles the tup. We are a people deeply obsessed with boundary markers. For generations, modern believers have treated Paul's command as a manifesto for cultural isolation. We have built entire subcultures around the idea that if we simply avoid the right movies, vote for the right candidates, and pull our children out of the right institutions, we have successfully resisted the world. We measure our obedience by the physical distance we place between ourselves and secular culture. We think of conformity as a geographical problem. We assume that if we are sitting behind the heavy wooden doors of a sanctuary, breathing in the conditioned air of a church building, we are safe. We think that turning off a car radio when a certain song plays, or swiping past a controversial article on the sterile glass of a smartphone, is what Paul meant by transformation. We have reduced a cosmic, psychological war into a localized game of behavior management. But this approach fundamentally misunderstands how the human mind actually works. You can listen exclusively to Christian radio, attend 3 Bible studies a week, and still be perfectly seamlessly conform to the architecture of the age. You can avoid every culturally taboo behavior and still process your fears, your finances, and your political anxieties using the exact same emotional machinery as your unbelieving neighbor. Wooden shutters, and the air smells faintly of salt and burning olive oil. The man pacing is Paul. The scribe is Tertius, and the letter they are. The boundary markers are not a defense. They are a distraction. When we read Romans chapter 12 through the lens of modern rule-keeping, we imagine the world as a list of bad behaviors floating out there in the ether. We think of the world as the place where the sinners are, doing the things that sinners do. But Paul is not talking about a list of behaviors. He is talking about a system of reality. Worldliness is not a geography. It is an operating system. It is the invisible grid through which you evaluate what makes a human being valuable, what makes a life successful, and what makes the future safe. It tells you that security is found in the accumulation of wealth. It whispers that your worth is tied directly to your visible productivity. And that grid does not respect the heavy wooden doors of a sanctuary. It slips right into the pews. It colors the sermons. It dictates how a congregation views power, and money, and status. All while they sing the right hymns and hold the right Bibles. There is no neutral territory. To understand why our modern checklists fail so spectacularly, and why this command is far more dangerous than a call to moral purity, we have to return to the winter of 57 AD. We have to walk. Composing will eventually be carried across the Mediterranean, unrolled in the capital of the empire, and read aloud to a terrified, divided group of believers, back into the rented room and look over the scribe's shoulder, right as the ink touches the papyrus. Because the specific Greek words Paul is choosing are about to reveal the exact shape of the invisible mold. The clay lamp flickers. Tertius dips his reed. The ink is black soot, mixed with water and tree gum. The dark liquid stains his calloused fingers. He waits. Paul paces the small room. His back aches from old Roman whips. The wind off the Aegean Sea is cold and damp. He is dictating a letter to the center of the known world. He is writing to Rome. He is writing to believers hiding in the shadows of the Palatine Hill. They walk past marble statues of emperors who call themselves the sons of God. They buy bread in markets dedicated to foreign deities. They are a tiny minority. They are exhausted. They are completely surrounded. Rome is not a neutral backdrop. It is a crushing weight. It breathes power. It exhales conformity. Its streets are paved with the stones of crushed nations. Its temples are built with the blood of the conquered. Its peace is maintained by the sword. Rome demands your allegiance. Rome demands your labor. Rome demands your mind. And into this iron machine, Paul sends a sheet of fragile papyrus. When they reach what we now call the 12th chapter, Paul dictates a command that will echo through the next 2,000 years of history. He does not send an army. He does not send silver. He sends sentences. By the time he reaches the 12th chapter, the rhythm of the letter shifts. The high arguments about law and grace become flesh and blood. The theology becomes an altar. He stops pacing. He looks at the scribe. He speaks the warning, "Do not be conformed to this world." The scratch of the reed against the rough papyrus sounds like dry grass. You can hear it in the silence of the room. The ink sinks into the fibers. The words become permanent. But the English translation we read today softens the blow. It makes the phrase sound passive. It makes it sound like a gentle suggestion. From a guidance counselor about peer pressure, the Greek does not suggest. The Greek sounds an alarm. Paul is not describing a temptation they might occasionally face. He is describing a gravitational pull that is already working on them. He is describing a force that is actively, aggressively, trying to crush their identity into a very specific shape. The command is not a request for better behavior. It is a warning about an active assault. To capture the violence of what is actually happening to the human mind, Paul reaches for a precise compound word. He takes a prefix. He slams it into a root noun. Do not be conformed to this world. It is not an isolated thought. Years later, a fisherman named Peter, writing from a different city, will use the syllables hit the cold air, and Tertius writes them down. And the word he chooses is terrifying. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Paul has just asked the believers to present their physical bodies as living sacrifices. It is a visceral, bloody image borrowed from the temple altar. And immediately after placing them on the altar, he tells them how to survive the fire. Do not be conformed to this world. When we read the English word world, our minds instantly default to a physical location. We think of a planet. We think of dirt and oceans and continents. We think of a geography we can somehow isolate ourselves from. The Greek word Paul uses is aeon. It does not mean a place. It means an age. It means an epoch. It is the span of time we are currently living in, complete with its own zeitgeist, its own underlying philosophies, and its own broken systems. You cannot escape an aeon by moving to a different city or locking the heavy wooden doors of a sanctuary, because the aeon is the very air you are breathing. But it is the verb that carries the terror of the command. The word translated as conformed is the Greek suschematizo. It is a compound word. The prefix is son, meaning together with exact same Greek root word to warn a group of scattered exiles in Asia Minor. Two different men, two different audiences. The same, urgent plea. And the root is schema, which means an outward shape, a fashion, a temporary appearance. In the ancient world, a schema was the mask an actor wore on a stage. It was the costume. It was the fleeting, outward posture that could change the moment the play was over. If realizing that the Bible is talking about the psychology of an age, rather than a list of rules, is making something click for you, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the schema is already built. The current age has a mold, cast in cold iron, and it is actively waiting for human material to fill it. And grammatically, suschematizo is a passive imperative verb. Paul is not saying, do not actively decide to copy the culture. He is saying, stop allowing yourselves to be squeezed into the mold of this age. He is describing a pressure that is already being applied to the soft clay of their minds. The empire is already pushing on them, from every side, trying to force their values, their fears, and their loves into the shape of the Roman schema. You have probably heard the phrase. You have probably seen it printed on youth group t-shirts or heard it deployed from a pulpit as a weapon against. That grammar changes everything. It means that if you do absolutely nothing, you will be conformed. If you just float along, waking up, going to work, consuming the media of the empire, and going to sleep, you will automatically take the shape of the container you are sitting in. Conformity is not a deliberate rebellion. It is a passive surrender. It is the slow, silent process of letting the age you live in dictate the shape of your soul. And Paul is not the only one who sees the mold closing in, because hundreds of miles away, another apostle is watching the exact same pressure crush a completely different group of people. An old fisherman holds a pen. His hands are thick. His joints ache from decades of pulling wet. Flaxen nets from cold water. Now, he sits in the shadows of a foreign city. He dictates a letter to a scattered people. He writes to strangers in Pontus. He writes to exiles in Galatia. He writes to outcasts in Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. They are not fighting emperors in marble courts. They are fighting the quiet hostility of their own neighbors. They are whispered about at the village wells. They are shunned in the merchant squares. Secular culture. Most people assume they know exactly what it means. Most people read, "Do not be conformed" as a behavioral checklist. They assume Paul is. They are cut off from family inheritances. The pressure on them is not a Roman sword. It is a suffocating, daily isolation. Peter knows how the human heart responds to exile. He knows what a terrified mind wants to do. A terrified mind wants to blend in. A terrified mind wants to survive. A terrified mind wants to put the mask back on. So he sends them a lifeline. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 14. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. What are those passions? They are the invisible scripts of the old life. They are the deep-seated cravings for approval. They are the desperate scrambles for financial security. They are the tribal hatreds they used to hold against outsiders. These are the shapes the culture offered them before they knew the truth. And now, under the heavy heat of persecution, those old shapes look like safety. They look like a way to stop the pain. But Peter draws a line in the sand. He uses the exact same verb as Paul, sushematizo. Stop taking the shape of the container. Stop putting on the costume of the age to avoid the friction of exile. The mold is everywhere. Paul sees it in the capital of the empire. Peter sees it in the dusty provinces of Asia Minor. The pressure does not care where you live.